Greetings, lore seekers, and welcome back to more Star Wars Legends lore. That's right, I'm back, and it's finally time to tackle that most dreaded of subjects, Stormtrooper armour. While not as heavily customised or as fitted to one body type as Clone Trooper armour, the Stormtrooper armour did, for everyday citizens or elite forces of the Empire, better protection than most against blaster fire. Any regular blaster, any holdout blaster, or anything that wasn't of a higher yield would essentially only glaze the armour, if not bounce off. That, in combination with the thermal glove beneath the armour, meant that even if you were hit by a particularly dangerous shot, as long as it didn't have any penetrating power, you were more than likely to survive. That's the key word: penetrating power. Now, I specifically say penetrating power, such as weapons like the Han Solo's heavy blaster, the DL-44, which had several modifications made for it that could punch through the armour of Stormtroopers, and most of these modifications were, as such, made illegal by the Empire, as was the A2-8, used by the Rebel Alliance and a couple of other forces previous to the Alliance, that were heavily specialised in penetrating through Stormtrooper plate. So, you know, it's not hard to understand why Stormtroopers look like cannon fodder as opposed to the regular Imperial Army, when you're dealing with an enemy force that specifically employs weapons that can punch through your armour. Although, in certain situations, that wouldn't really work for them. But anyway, enough revelling about the unfair advantage of the Rebel Alliance, because, you know, story. Let's look at the armour itself. The many improvements over the phases of Clone Trooper armour, and perhaps even one or two specialised variants, such as ISB variants of Stormtrooper armour. But anyway, moving on to it. So, the first thing to note is that this isn't actually available for public sale. So any sets that you'd encounter in the wild or used by the forces have been captured from Imperial shock troops or stolen. So this wasn't available commercially at any price, and the main manufacturer of this was the Imperial Department of Military Research, as they would find the best ways to fine-tune the armour over time and make adaptations to it, depending on the requirements of environment, which is where you get the various different variants for it. So one of the first things I'm going to talk about is the body glove, the black bit of the armour. What is that? That is essentially a body envelope that protects from thermal, cold, and any environmental effects that could affect the Stormtrooper. In tangent with the rest of the armour and any rebreathers that are in the helmet or any specialised breathing equipment, this ensures to provide the trooper with adequate protection in any environment. With severe environments like Hoth or everything else requiring additional things in place on top of that. So with this you can survive in most environments at least comfortably for a short time. Hell, with this glove and the rest of the armour and rebreather systems, you can even survive in the vacuum of space for a short period of time. But we'll get back to that later on. One thing I will note before, one of my favourite lines from the Fantastic Four movies, this body glove essentially keeps the warm stuff warm and the cool stuff cool. YouTube censorship laws being what they are now, god damn it, I can't put that clip in there. But anyway, swiftly moving on. Right, so the next most important bit of kit in this is the Stormtrooper's utility belt. Yes, a Stormtrooper has a utility belt. It's where all of its gear, the extra gear they carry around this, which carries ration packs. So you've got 3 energy rations for high moving around and stuff behind enemy lines if you're on long tours of duty, 3 water packs to keep you hydrated over a long period of time, several blaster packs for your E11 blaster, a thermal detonator for any tough things you might have to deal with, any binders for securing prisoners, making sure they're properly handcuffed. Oh, if any of you were wondering where Luke got those handcuffs for Chewie from the first movie, well, episode 4, sorry, that is where he got them from, out of his utility belt. And as you already know, because you've seen Luke use this in action, there is a thick wire in there that can support heavy weights, or at least the weight of 2 people, and 2 grappling hooks. So it is quite a versatile piece of kit. It does have a few other bits as well, such as a de-ionizer for use in combat, you know, if you're affected by an iron weapon, a descrambler and various other things for espionage type things, a spare comm link, which is military hardware, specifically the C1 model to try and break through jamming, and a med kit, because, you know, what's the most important thing to have when you're out and about in the galaxy at large? Something to patch up your holes with. As well as any mission specific gear that can also go on to empty slots on the utility belt, as well as door cracking tools, such as the Star Wars equivalent of lockpicks, which is a little device you just stick on the door, and if it's got an electronic lock it will decode it. Otherwise, you may want to grab that handy thermal detonator you had beforehand, although considering the power of those detonators, you may want to hold back if you actually want what's in there to be living. So, moving on to the Stormtrooper helmet. First things first, this is a multi-layered composite plasteel composite armoured shell with 4 layers primarily, and several other additional layers over certain weak points such as vents, rebreathers and sensory bits. But we'll get to that as we break it down. So, the first layer is obviously the plastoid composite armour, which is the whiter outer shell of the helmet. Then you have the secondary layer, which is essentially an anti-blaster lining similar to the black parts of the rest of the Stormtrooper armour. This is essentially there to absorb the energy of blasters and dissipate it, just saving the life of the trooper inside. So, you know, even if you do get shot at a weapon that is designed specifically to punch through the plasteel composite armour, you can still have a likelihood of surviving, even if, you know, you may have life-altering injuries. Following that secondary layer, there is a third layer that is used for magnetic shielding, and this is for various things, such as dealing with magnetic weaponry and various other things. On the final bit of the inn, there is a layer designed to protect the user from trauma. Yes, that's right, trauma. The Ewoks may have been able to knock the troopers out, but at least they haven't caused them permanent brain damage. Well, until they manage to get the helmet off anyway, and then, you know, Ewoks do what Ewoks will do. So, the combination of these 4 layers is there to keep the trooper alive in most situations, a slight improvement over earlier armour designs. Next, moving on to the auditory systems of the suit. These are located on the sides of the helmet and are hardened with plasteel to protect them, so they cannot be easily destroyed or knocked off by enemies in order to try and handicap the trooper. These connect to internal comm links in the system for inter-suit communication between the various squads, as well as dampening things for explosions and loud noises that could damage the auditory system of the trooper. Because, you know, you might think the Empire treats people like cannon fodder. They do at least, you know, try to keep you alive long enough to dish it out back to those damn rebel scum. Hope your health plan's good. Moving on. The filtration and air systems of the suit actually have an intricate system of air vents designed for removing and bringing in oxygen. Well, removing heat anyway, and bringing in oxygen. But these are all designed to slam shut if and when hazardous materials such as biological contaminants or gases are detected, or if the trooper goes into the vacuum of space. Now, the suit does have 20 minutes worth of air to survive in vacuum, so that it is more than enough time to go outside, run along over the surface of an asteroid or, you know, a base, and then breach back in before you have to swap out anything from your spare tanks. But we'll go into that when I actually go into the backpack. Moving on to the visor/visual systems of the helmet. So, as a lot of people have heard, the Rebels always complain about Stormtrooper armour being hard to see through and being difficult. But here's the thing that you don't actually know about Stormtrooper armor is it runs off a general code that is controlled by central systems. If you steal the armor, these can generally not work. If you haven't, the code hasn't been loaded into it and you've stolen the armor, it's generally not going to work for you. So, without that code to turn on the visual systems of the armor and auditory dampening systems of the armor, it's not going to work. So it's no surprise that people find it really hard and difficult to see through. Granted, as well, earlier models of it did lack some of these upgrades, but the standard one for it towards the end of the Galactic Civil War was you would have a holographic hood system that would allow troopers to be able to see through smoke and other obstacles. So, if any rebel trooper was trying to throw down some smoke grenades to get some distance between a trooper, don't matter, that trooper can still see you, so you better duck because he's about to fire. Another thing as well is it did have dampening systems as well, so if an explosion was to go off, a trooper would be protected and have no damage to their retinas as the armour would filter out the explosion, thus enabling it to, them to main more combat operations, which probably also means that flashbangs might be useless against stormtroopers, depending on what generation of armour you are using, thinking about it. That would explain why concussion grenades are probably the way to go when fighting stormtroopers, because you're using kinetic force. But anyway, getting back to the audio-visual systems. Now, there is an inbuilt IFF readout on each of the Stormtroopers' armour. This enables them to be able to pick out friendly targets quite easily in a confusing situation. Now, that is extremely useful, especially when you've got enemy soldiers running around starting to steal your own armour. So, that unit over there doesn't have a friendly target. Let's go and ask them. Oh, they're firing. And engage. So, all of these things together do actually make the Stormtrooper helmet quite an impressive bit of kit, but depending on the variation of it you're using, or if the enemy were able to get hold of the general code for that particular batch of helmets, you might be at a slight disadvantage, because it could be used. Especially if you played the game Rebel Assault 2 to the Rebels' advantage until, you're discovered to be in the wrong area and you try and shoot somebody and then they activate an alarm. Yes, I am planning to do a Let's Play of that at some point. But anyway, swiftly moving on. So, as you know, I covered the backpack earlier on. So this is useful for troopers who are on long-term deployment, as this contains extra rations in case you've already used the ones that are on your utility belt, as well as additional power supplies and power packs for your weapons, and also for the suit itself, because if you're operating behind enemy lines, you generally don't want to run out of power. Now, the average power pack on a Stormtrooper's armour will usually last for about 240 hours, so having two of these, that brings you up to 480. You can cause some real mayhem in that time. The backpack also sports additional communication gear, including a backup for the IFF readouts of your armour, just in case any of these go down, which would be a bit of a bad situation if they do go down, although this also means they're susceptible to enemy countermeasures, where they could kill troopers trapped behind enemy lines and steal these components for use in their own counter-insurgency actions. So, troopers, better destroy those first if you think you're going to get overwhelmed. And this next option may help that, at least the ammunition for it will. A mortar launcher is also usually kept in the backpack. Yes, that's right, mortar launchers for dealing with those tough to ferry out targets. Now, depending on the situation and where you're deployed to, the standard being a cooling unit, or cooling systems for the armour, would be kept in the backpack as well. And if you are having to be part of a snow trooper detachment, you'd instead have a heater, which you could then use to keep yourself warm, especially, you know, once again, if you're trapped behind enemy lines and you cut off from your troopers. Hopefully you'd eventually be able to get yourself back to your own lines and the quartermaster can give you a dim view as to what you've done to his equipment. Let it be said that quartermasters in every universe do not like it when you damage the equipment beyond reasonable repair. Oh dear. But anyway, swiftly moving on. So there are a notable amount of modifications stormtroopers can actually make to their armour that still fit within acceptable regulations that the Empire allow. One such example of this would be modifying the gloves so they can be powered up for hand-to-hand combat, thus delivering stun shocks to anyone they come into contact with. So, you know, if you've got somebody who particularly likes to use their fists in your squad, they may want to take this option, and then you want to put them in the duty for capturing somebody alive. Although, you know, you'd get the same effect from a stun setting. One particularly thing of note as well, for high-ranking stormtroopers or stormtrooper commanders, they would outfit the armour with a personal shield generator, thus providing more protection, limited protection for them, so that they can at least survive longer with which to command the troops. Because, you know, any rebel force or any army is going to try and take out your command structure to try and stop you and make your army fall apart very quickly. Although good luck doing that to Vader. One notable variation on the armour I should probably mention as well is the Shadow Stormtroopers, which were nearly identical in their armour as regular Stormtroopers, except they were coloured black. And instead of being just armed usually with the standard E11, they could also be armed with iron pistols and vibro knuckle dusters for boarding actions. Now, these were the personal stormtroopers of the Emperor's Agent Black Hole, which is why sometimes they are misknown as Black Hole Stormtroopers, or at least they were in one of the LEGO sets. But I shall cover more on the Shadow Troopers and their master Cronel, aka Black Hole, in their own novel when I actually cover the Shadow of Mindor. Which, if you can get a copy of that book, I do suggest getting it because it is quite a good read, as it's shortly before Luke actually resigns his commission from the New Republic / Rebel Alliance, as he's promoted to a general, and it's one of his campaigns. But anyway, back to where we were. So, notable users. So, one of the first ones I should probably mention is Jedi Battlemaster Kyle Katarn. Yeah, Kyle Katarn, the Health Inspector himself, was a Stormtrooper commander originally, which means he will have actually had the additional shield protection. And I do suspect that he may have liberated his personal shield that he uses in all the games he's in from said armour. Just for a bit of speculation there. Following this up with the boys themselves, the 501st Legion, Vader's Fist. All of them were decked out in this armour, sporting various different modifications, including the Dark Trooper Phase 0 armour, but they will get covered in their own video as, yeah, the Phase 0s were a bit tragic. I'll cover that more when I actually get back to doing the Dark Trooper project. Another notable unit, although technically Renegade Stormtroopers, was the Hand of Judgment. That's right, Larone's boys, as they'd decided to go Renegade but not betray their oaths. They were still fighting for the Empire they believed in, even if the Empire that existed in that day and age very much but didn't stand up to the belief of the Empire. So, what did they do? Well, they stole an ISB shuttle, chock filled with ISB equipped Stormtrooper gear, which conveniently was preloaded with all the general codes they would need. Oh, the ISB caused so much trouble. And swiftly moving on, the next notable wearers of the Stormtrooper armour was in fact the people who Larone's lot eventually went to train. Spoiler alert there. That's right. The infantry of Thrawn's own little pocket empire that he was setting up in the unknown regions as an expansion of the Palpatine's rule. The Empire of the Hand, or Thrawn's Empire as it was also known. And these people were actually trained by the Hand of Judgment, as they'd eventually had to get away from the heat. That's a bit of a spoiler for their story, but do check it out, it's very interesting. But anyway, if you want to comment any more notable uses down in the comments below, please feel free to do that. And maybe let me know what you think on this video on Stormtrooper armour. As you're probably wondering, how did the Rebels manage to actually kill many of the Stormtroopers? Well, it helps that the Rebels were specifically using weapons that were proven to be able to punch through the armour. Or, you know, adjusting the power settings on their weapons way past the load that they should normally be able to do. I mean, even Han Solo's blaster was modified to be able to punch through Imperial plate. Many modifications, I might add, were outlawed by the Empire. But hey, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you like what you heard, maybe consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. And remember, the multiverse is full of darkness and the unknown.
And a little more knowledge might light our way.